think I knew I was going to live in Paris to study there since I was maybe 8 or 10. It's something very usual, and not only in my family but in my social class in the Moroccan bourgeoisie. People know that when they will be 17 or 18, they will go abroad to study. The majority of them go to France or to Belgium, Switzerland, and some of them to the US or to Canada. But it's something very very usual in my social class.
Okay, so you were going off at age 17 to Paris to university, and I read somewhere that you didn't like being a child. Is this correct?
Yes, I hated it. I hated childhood, and I don't have very good memories about that period of time. I think that I hated the fact that people would tell me all the time what to do, what not to do, and that I was not taken seriously. You know, when you speak to adults when you are a child, they just say, "Oh, but she's a child. You know, it's not serious. It's not important." And I try not to do that with my own children. I really hated that. I wanted to be free and to do things by myself, and I wanted people to take me very seriously.
I think I was the same way. That's like that. It causes stress when you're a kid and you're saying something very sincerely and you're sort of being dismissed out of turn simply because
Yeah,
you're a kid. That's frustrating.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. So you moved to Paris at age 17, and there's this feeling of I've read you describe it as feeling both French and Moroccan, and yet there's still a feeling of dislocation when you get there. You're not quite fully French, right? Like it's an adjustment.
Yes, because you know, in Morocco, I used to speak French with my parents. I was going to the French school. I was studying French authors, French geography. I knew everything about France. It was not like going in a country that I've know nothing about. But at the same time, I didn't feel completely as a French woman and not as a Parisian woman. And it was very difficult to find my place there. And what was difficult also was that I knew a lot of things about them, about French people and French culture, but they knew very few about me. And I was, I think, at the same time surprised and disappointed by the fact that French people had so few interest for us, for people from Maghreb, even if we have very strong relationship. But I felt a sort of inequality between us, and because of the fact that I knew so much about them and they knew nothing about me.
Right. I mean, and you just referenced the Maghreb, and I think for my listeners, some people might not know to what you are referring. So, can we
Yeah, I'm
explain what the
referring
Maghreb
to
is?
the three country of North Africa: Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, that were all of them French colony.
And it means the West, right? Doesn't the Maghreb mean
Yes,
West?
exactly, exactly. And the mashreq in Arabic means the east. So it's Libya and Egypt.
Got it. Okay. So you have this experience living in France, going to university. Where did you go? I'm curious to university in Paris.
Oh, first I studied philosophy, and then I went to Sciences Po to study political science, and then I
To
became a journalist. So I went to a journalist school also.
what was the school for political science?
It's called Sciences Po. It's a very famous school in the center of Paris, in the Boulevard Saint-Germain-des-Prés. It's very famous because it's the place where all the presidents and ministers and all that they all study there, and it was very interesting, very very interesting, and it gave me also the opportunity to travel. And I went to Hungary for 1 year working at the French embassy. It was really great. I loved those years. I learned a lot.
I bet. And listen, Paris is a pretty fun city to be in as a young person, I have to imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And for a young girl like I was, who was yeah, eager to live adventures and have new experiences and to be free and to have no one to look above me, after me, and not to ask for any kind of authorization, it was really great. And I remember when I arrived there, it was in the summer, and it was the World Cup. So it was really great. The first World Cup that French ever won. So the atmosphere was just wonderful, and people were kissing everywhere on the streets and near the Seine. And I was really, really impressed by that, by the freedom of French people drinking, smoking, and kissing outside. And I just wanted to do exactly the same.
Right, right. So wait, was that 1998?
Yes, exactly.
I think I was there that summer and
It was great.
remember, yeah.
Beautiful
And I
summer.
also, yeah, I was also there when they won the Euro Cup,
Yeah,
like
2 years after. Yeah.
2 years after. Yeah, and I've told this story many times to like friends of mine here in the States. Like one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Like the city, first of all, it just shuts down. Like
Yeah.
nothing except the bars. The bars are open. Everybody's in the bars watching, or they're at home watching. And then as soon as the match was ended and France had won, just the streets, just it was a street party, people waving flags, honking their horns. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I have French roots. My family, like my grandmother is from Alsace, and
Oh,
um,
like my grandmother.
yeah, exactly. So I've got French roots and Cajun French roots, and I feel an affinity. But even if I did not, I think I would have. I was swept up in it. I was cheering as though I like lived in Paris.
Yeah, it was
So
wonderful. It was a wonderful summer.
yeah. So I want to talk to you about your formation as a writer, and I think that you always kind of wanted to write, and you were encouraged to write by your parents. Your mother was a great storyteller, or is a great storyteller.
Yeah, my mother and my grandmother also. My grandmother, she used to tell us a lot of stories when we were kids with my sisters. My grandmother, she lived in a farm in Morocco, in the center of Morocco, in a farm with no electricity. And so when we would be with her in the farm, we wouldn't watch TV or do things like that. We would just spend time with her, walking with her, having walks, or spending just time listening to her stories about Alsace, about the time when she was young, how she met my grandfather, and the war, and the moment she arrived in Morocco. And she had this ability really to, yeah, to fascinate you and to build a character. She was a great storyteller, and I think that she could have been a very good writer.
So, and it was encouraged when you made your attempts as a child to be creative and to write. That was something that was celebrated by your family, right?
Yeah,
Encouraged.
I think my parents were a little bit afraid um, by the idea that I could become an artist and not have like a financial stability. But at the same time, for them, there was nothing, yeah, better, nothing they wanted more than the life for me, than the life of a writer. For them, it was the best life you could ever have, the life of a writer, because they were reading all the time. They had huge admiration for writers. So yeah, it was like a fantasy for them. And maybe when I was a child and a teenager, I just wanted to be a writer to please them, and then it became something, yeah, more personal.
Yeah, my memory of being in France is that when I told people that I was interested in writing, it wasn't. It was accepted, and there was a level of respect that I don't experience here in the States as much with non-writerly people. I feel like the profession has maybe greater esteem in French culture than it does in American culture. I don't
Yeah,
know if that's been your experience.
yeah, absolutely. I think that France is pretty exceptional when it comes to literature, even if you compare to other European countries. Um, maybe Russia and England are also countries where literature is very important, but France is very special. The respect towards writer, but also the fact that in France we say that every French citizen has a novel somewhere that he's written at one moment in his life. Everyone has this ambition at one point to write a novel, to write something, and yeah, it's a part of our life, and that's something that I really really like in French, in the French culture and the French society.
So to get back to you, as a student where you're studying political science and then you shift to journalism. There was a period in your early career when you, as you mentioned, I believe a minute ago, worked as a journalist and you were writing for a magazine called, I believe, Jeune Afrique, if I'm
Mhm.
pronouncing that correctly,
Yeah.
which means Young Africa. And this gave you an opportunity, I think, to revisit Morocco and to re examine the place of your childhood and to maybe see it anew. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I feel like this trilogy that you're working on of novels, the second of which, Watch Us Dance, is like the main subject of today's conversation. I feel like it too is obviously very concerned with you looking backwards into not only your childhood but your family history in Morocco. So let's start with writing for Jeune Afrique, and if you could just talk about what that experience working as a journalist on that particular beat did for you in your understanding of Morocco.
Yeah, Jeune Afrique is a very well-known Pan-African magazine. It's very important for countries like Morocco or Algeria and Tunisia. And so I was very happy and I felt privileged to work in a magazine like this one. And I had the chance to become a reporter, and they sent me first in Algeria, then in Tunisia, and a lot in Morocco, as you said. And what was interesting for me is that I was able at that time to get out of my little bubble, the bubble I was raised in. Because as a child, I was spending all my time with my sisters at home, studying and writing and reading all the time. And my parents, they didn't have a lot of friends. They wouldn't go out a lot. So I felt pretty isolated by my class, my social class, and by the education I was given. So when I became a reporter, I felt that it was for me the a unique occasion to meet my country, to really meet the people, and to present myself not as a little bourgeois living in the nice neighborhood of Rabat, but as a journalist who wants to know them and who is curious and who can ask them a lot of questions. And it was really great because not only I went out of the bubble, but I think that it helped me fight against certain fears that I had as a woman and as a Moroccan bourgeois, and it was very important for me. And as you said, that's something I used also when I was writing the trilogy. I think Morocco is like a man I'm deeply in love with, but that I don't really know, that I want to know more, and from whom I hope he's going to love me back, but I'm never sure of that.
Yeah, it's a bad boyfriend.
Yeah, very bad choice.
But I read something that you said about this period of your life working as a journalist and kind of rediscovering Morocco. And you say that I realized how indifferent the Moroccan bourgeois is to the country. People know all about France and the United States, but don't care what happens 2 streets away. So there is this outward orientation among the bourgeois social class in Morocco where they're kind of looking out, up to France and across the sea to the States, but maybe not paying as careful attention to their own country.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think that it's something quite universal. That's something I experience in many, many countries, the indifference of the bourgeoisie. They say, oh, it's so sad that you see poor people and people begging in the streets, and that's so sad. And then they forget very, very quickly. I remember when I think it was in San Francisco a few years ago before COVID, and so many people living in the streets in one of the richest city in the world. And you feel exactly the same. You feel the indifference of the bourgeoisie and of rich people. So yeah, my parents were. I don't think they were indifferent, because my mother, she was a doctor and she was really, really involved in her work and in helping poor people. And she would do for the half the day people would pay, and the other half people would not pay for the consult. And she helped a lot of people. And every night when she would come back from work, she would tell us about what she saw about young women dying because they can't afford to pay a treatment, about children who have nothing and can't pay for a treatment against cancer. So my parents were different, but at the same time, yeah, as I said, we were living in a bubble.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I think about the American bourgeois. Maybe one note of difference would be that I don't know how much the bourgeois of America are looking outward. They're just kind of like navel gazing. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not interested in, they're just kind of interested in themselves or something. But I want to fast forward a bit in the interest of time to the novel that you wrote. Is it Chanson douce?
Hmm.
Which was published as, and that means lullaby, but it was published as The Perfect Nanny. I think like American readers would know that book as The Perfect Nanny. And you, at age 35, won the Goncourt Prize, which is France's most prestigious literary prize. So we made a leap from your work as a journalist to this moment. There's obviously a lot of work and personal experiences in between, but that was really your breakout moment, I suppose, where you became a literary figure in France and around the world. So I'd love to just talk to you about that experience. That must have been head spinning, to have all of that happen.
Yes, it was. And for me, it was a surprise. I'm really honest. I was sure I was not going to win the prize. It was just my second book. And the other writers on the list were much more famous than I was. And they had like big and important work behind them. So I was absolutely sure that someone else was going to win. So I was surprised. I was, of course, very happy. I was not naive, and I knew also what people were going to do with um, my particular personality, the fact that I was a woman, the fact that I was an immigrant, that I was from an Arab country. I knew also that there was going to be some manipulation from the media and from people, but I was not, yeah, as I said, I was not naive, so I was prepared to that. But I think I was not prepared to the fact that you become in a way you become a hostage to success. Success is wonderful. It gives you a lot of opportunities, but at the same time it has no smell and no taste. It's nothing. It's not something that you can touch. It's not something that is going to warm you when you're cold, or to help you when you're sad. So yeah, success is something really weird. There is also a certain dose of poison in success, because when you have it, you don't want to lose it, and it's always dangerous to have something that you don't want to lose, because freedom is just another word for nothing else to lose.
Right. Well, there was something I read as I was preparing for this conversation that you said that I thought was notable and wise. And it had to do with the aftermath of winning the Goncourt for Chanson douce, and having this kind of, what do you call it? Not an overnight success, but that's what people call it. This sudden, suddenly you're a literary figure and all of these opportunities are coming your way. And what you said about this time as you considered what to work on next, and I'm going to paraphrase here, so forgive me if I don't get it exactly right, but you said something to the effect of, I know that with this success, I like had an obligation to myself to work on something that had a, a risk of failure. Basically, you had to take a big swing on your next book. And that strikes me as the correct attitude, and maybe not one that everybody takes, because like you say, you don't want to lose that success. So sometimes I think people can sort of pull back and can get a little bit cautious, and you pushed yourself to do the opposite, correct?
Yes, correct. For two reasons. I think the first one is that taking this risk of failure is also maybe proving me that I'm not a fraud. Because if I don't fail, it means that this success that I had with the Goncourt is, it's not just luck. It's just not just once. It means that with work and with commitment and focusing on my work, maybe it can happen again, and I'm not a fraud. But the other thing is that I have a very strong relationship with difficulty. I love things to be difficult, and yeah, I think it's something not only in my work but in my life. I like things to be difficult. I like to fight, and I like to go as far as I can go. And I like, yeah, when something is difficult to achieve. And for my books, it's something very important. Each time when I begin a book, I always tell myself, you have to do something really difficult, something that frightens you. I love being frightened by things.
Hmm. Well, speaking of frightening, you are in the midst of publishing the second book in a trilogy that essentially mythologizes your family's history in Morocco and eventually, your own personal history beyond Morocco. I don't know exactly what the third book entails, but I know that it gets into your life more explicitly. So I would imagine it takes you to France in that
Yes, to
book.
France and to the United States also.
Okay, okay. So that's a big project, and it implicates your family, which adds a layer of difficulty and potential tension. I know that those are some issues that writers have to navigate. How do family members feel seeing themselves on the page and seeing themselves fictionalized and made to do the work of an author, essentially. So the book in question today is Watch Us Dance, which tells, I think, primarily, or it gets into the story of your parents,
Mhm.
more or less. You're fictionalizing, but they enter the scene. The book which preceded this one, In the Country of Others, tells the story of your grandparents primarily. So you're working through the generations. Your grandparents appear in Watch Us Dance, but are not maybe the main event. And something that you have said about your own work in kind of a self-assessment is that, quote, I think I'm always writing about women, domination, violence. My obsession is freedom. How can we be free and at the same time linked to one another as a wife, as a mother, and try to stay as an individual? I also write a lot about disillusionment. So you've touched on this already, but I underlined that quote because I feel like it speaks to what I read in Watch Us Dance. I could see those themes at play here. Do you agree with yourself, first of all?
Yes, I do, and it's not always the case. I don't agree with me all the time, but yes, this time I do. And I think that as a child, as a teenager, and even today, I've witnessed a lot of women who were trapped in their life as mothers, as wife, with this idea that a woman have to stay, that she can't leave, that a woman is supposed to sacrifice herself and sacrifice her own happiness for her children and for her family. And at the same time, I feel that those links that we have with people we love, with our family, with a man or a woman we love, with our children, those links are beautiful and very, very important because they give you a certain security, and they give you tenderness, and they give you affection. But at the same time, I can't help myself but looking at those links also with a certain distance, and feeling that once you have that, there's also something that you lose. It's the possibility to live, and it's the possibility to be free. It's the possibility to be just you and doing things for you. So I think I write all the time about this tension between the desire of women to build all those links and to build a house and a household, that to take care of it, and at the same time this desire, secret desire, that we have sometimes just to go away.
Hmm. And I want to place the book in some historical context as well, because it takes place, I believe, in like the late 60s, early 70s. And this is after Morocco breaks away from French colonial rule and achieves its independence. King Hassan is the dictator, essentially, and was so until I believe the late 80s. So he had a long rule, and that regime was oppressive in many ways, but also, it's complicated because there was some, I think, especially at the beginning, as you describe Amin, the patriarch of the family, he had some reverence for King Hassan, and there was some pride in the fact of Morocco having achieved autonomous rule. But that is the backdrop. That time period is the backdrop for the story that you're telling in Watch Us Dance. And I imagine you had to do a good bit of research to be able to inhabit it so fully as you do.
Yes, I did. I did a lot of research, and what was difficult was to find the little details that I needed for my writing. You know, when you write a novel, of course, you have to understand the political situation, the economical and social situation. But what you need more are details about the day-to-day life, what people were eating, drinking, what kind of clothes they were wearing, what was on the television or on the cinema that year. So I had to make all those research to find the details that helped me, yeah, put some life and some realism in my work. It's very difficult, but at the same time, it's something that I really really love, because sometimes you read a historical book and there is just like one anecdote and one detail, and you know that thanks to this detail you will write like 10 pages, or you will write a whole scene, and that's something that I love very much.
Yeah, that's great. Like one little tiny brushstroke, and it gives you a story, basically, to tell, a mini story to tell within the novel. And you also delved into family history. You were talking and interviewing family members. I believe your grandparents are no longer living. I don't know. I don't know if I have that exactly right, but I think you had a chance to talk to them about this stuff, and I'm sure that found its way into the novel as well. Correct?
Yes, yes, I did. And, you know, my grandmother, she shared a lot of things with me, and she told me a lot of stories. So I had uh, extraordinary material when I was beginning to write the country of others. So my grandmother, she was already dead, but I asked my mother again about those stories. And my sisters, they remembered also in their own way the tales of my grandmother. So it was quite easy to make her relive in the book.
Yeah. Okay. And so your grandmother, was her name Anne Dobb?
Hmm.
I think you have said that you viewed them, your grandparents, as kind of characters in a novel as a child, like before you ever became a novelist yourself. They were kind of larger than life figures for you because of their life stories. Your grandmother, as we've talked about, was a good storyteller. Your grandfather, I heard, had a scar on his belly. And when you asked him about it as a child, he told you that he had a fight with a tiger.
Yeah, he said that he had a fight with a tiger in Germany, in a forest in Germany. And I went back to school and I told my friends, you know what, my grandfather, he had a fight with a tiger in Germany. And they made fun of me, of course, because they said that there were no tiger in Germany. But then I understood that for my grandfather, it was a way for me to tell him for him to tell me about the war, because my grandfather had he was traumatized by the war, obviously, and the tiger were the Nazis. But for him, it was too difficult to talk about the time where he was a prisoner in a camp in Germany. But I love the fact that he tried to use a metaphor to tell me about the violence he witnessed and the violence he was victim of. And yeah, I think it was very interesting.
Well, a word that occurred to me as I was reading this novel is unflinching. Uh, you do a wonderful job of drawing characters who are three dimensional and deeply complicated. There's nothing simple about a character in a Leila Slimani novel. There are no stock characters, and it leaves the reader feeling like he is dealing with human beings, first of all, on the page, as opposed to caricatures. And sometimes there can be ambivalence about how to feel. Like, do I like this guy? Do I not like this guy? maybe I love them. I don't know what's going on here, but I love that because it seems truer to life to me. That's how people strike me when you actually get to know them. Everybody is a mixed bag, right? Nobody is a simple black or white, good or bad. We all contain multitudes. And this book deals with infidelity, incest, um, very what's the word? Like difficult issues regarding gender roles. That's a big theme in the book. And I think about Mathilde. There's a line from In the Country of Others where she talks about her love for her children and how she loved them all the more because of all the things that she had given up for them: happiness, passion, freedom. So these kinds of issues about what it takes, the kinds of sacrifices that women in particular and mothers in particular are forced to make in life in general, but maybe more so during this particular era in history and in this place in Morocco where gender roles were uh, maybe more rigid and defined, and there wasn't quite as much social freedom for women. And it's interesting because Watch Us Dance gets into the family history that centers on your parents. And as you mentioned earlier, your mother was a doctor in this era and was one of the first women to practice as a doctor in Morocco. So she's bucking these trends and is part of the vanguard of some of this social change. So I just threw a lot at you, but I think first of all, compliments to you on
Thank you.
rendering all of this because I think it takes some creative courage to get in there and do this stuff and to be willing to stare down these complexities in people and their bad behaviors too, especially when it might implicate family, right?
Yeah, but as you said, I feel that the character is really alive when I begin to see the contradiction inside the character, and when something is resisting in the character. I don't want to write about heroes or about saints or about caricature in general. I'm not interested in that. I want to write about ordinary people, people like you and me, and about the fact also that we all have inside us, we have dark sides, and we have also contradictory aspiration. We want at the same time passion and security. We want comfort and we want to adventure. And I think it's interesting to explore that in every human being. And what I love with literature is that I never judge my character, never. I think that a book is not a trial. It's maybe one of the unique places in the world where you can try to dig very deep in the soul of someone and just try to understand, try to feel some empathy. You know, when I write, uh, I feel that I'm like a lawyer and trying to defend each of them. And not to say he's not guilty, because in a way, all my characters are guilty for one or another thing, but just to say, yeah, maybe he is or she is guilty, but I want you to hear about her story. And I think it's important sometimes to be able just to shut up and to listen to the story of people. We want to judge all the time, and we judge all the time, but we're not patient enough and we don't listen to the story.
Well, I feel like, yeah, I mean, to continue with this legal metaphor, I feel like there's a presentation of evidence here, but there is not a judgment that I'm feeling from you as the author. You're looking at all of the evidence, you're kind of laying it out there and the character's thoughts and actions and everything else, and sort of left up to the reader. And it's not an easy judgment in the end, which is what I love, even though there is damning evidence of misdeed, or somebody has done something that is morally questionable. Like I say, people are complicated and you end up having affection, I think, for these characters, despite, maybe the darker aspects of their life. It's relatable. We all have this stuff, right? And I want to ask you about Aisha. Is that how you pronounce her name? Okay, so Aisha is the daughter of Amin and is it Amin and Mathilde?
Exactly.
Okay, so Amin and Mathilde, just so listeners can kind of follow along. Amin is the grandfather, Mathilde is the grandmother, and then Aisha is is their daughter, and she's kind of the golden child. right? She's their pride and joy. She's the one who, in her industriousness and seriousness and commitment to study, she's very bright. I feel like I think they feel like she's got a good chance to go far, and they're investing in her success, sending her off to medical school in Strasbourg, and she's really on a good track to become uh, like what an OBGYN, I think, is eventually
Yeah,
what she
exactly.
becomes. So Aisha and eventually her love interest Mehdi are at the heart of this novel. And the Mehdi character is a kind of tragic figure, I think inspired by your father a bit. And I think in particular, what I want to hear you talk about is Mehdi having this creative dream and a very good heart and a artistic soul that winds up not being realized. Like I believe even in the novel, you might describe it as betraying his own dream. And I think that this is not uncommon for a writer who goes on to publish and to have a career in letters or in the arts in any, field, but is to have a parent who had an unrealized creative dream and had talent but never pursued it or didn't have the opportunity to pursue it. So am I on the right track here? I feel
Yes,
like
yes,
that's the
you are.
case.
No, no, you are. My father, I'm sure that my father actually wanted to become a writer, and then, as I write it in the book, he betrayed his dreams. But not only, I think, because he didn't dare to become a writer, but also because he was living in a moment where it was very difficult to be an intellectual in a country like Morocco. In the book, I describe the fact that the king Hassan II had a very bad relationship, very violent relationship with intellectuals. He hated them. And at one point, he decided to shut and to close a lot of departments in universities and to close schools. And he used to say that it's better for a man to have a gun than a pen, and that he was always despising intellectual because I think he was afraid that they were going to question him. So I think that the character of Mehdi, he understands that he's not, it's not the good time and it's not the good place to pursue this dream of becoming an intellectual and a writer. And he wants to change the world. He wants to have a career. He wants to be someone and to be in the center of the conversation. And I think that he's being a pragmatic opportunist. He understands that the only way to do that is to work inside the system, not out of the system. That if he decides to become a writer, he's going to be marginalized and probably at one point to get arrested and all this. He will never have the life he wants with the big house, with the wife Aisha, who is now a bourgeois. So yeah, he decided to, yeah, to betray his ideals and to betray his dreams and to work inside the system and to try to convince himself that he's not corrupted, and even if it's inside the system he's going to change the world. But we all know that it's not working like this.
Hmm. Well, and I'm not going to spoil it. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds in terms of what happens to these characters because it's worth readers reading it for themselves. It's totally absorbing. And what I love about reading outside, I always say this, like, thank you so much for taking me out of the United States. You get sort of sick of wherever you live, I think, and it's nice to get away, and maybe particularly nice to get away from the States because, I don't know, the States is a lot about the States. And so I loved being in Morocco in this book, and I loved learning about it, and I loved coming to understand the complexities of it, even in this period of time when, you know, it was more politically rigid and dictatorial, more socially conservative. It was also a place where Jimi Hendrix summered in 1969, which I did not know. I didn't know that. I mean, I guess I could have figured it out. I'm not maybe a great Jimi Hendrix historian, but I do know in a broad sense that there was a big influx of draft dodgers and peaceniks and hippies who went to Morocco, kind of fled the threat of going to Vietnam and all that kind of stuff. And that factors into this novel, which was a lot of fun. I believe it's the town of Essaouira. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Essaouira being a hippie town, these details I didn't know. So then I'm going on to the internet and searching this stuff, and looking at pictures, and I love that part of it. But the larger point is that Morocco, like any place, contains multitudes. It is complex and defies easy categorization, and it could contain all of these things at once, which is interesting. King Hassan and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, but I'm happy to hear you say that because I think as an African woman, I was raised like many Africans with the idea that our countries are not that interesting, that the interesting countries are European countries or the United States, that an American novel is a universal novel, that it will talk to anyone, but that Morocco or Senegal or Ivory Coast are not that interesting and that no one will want to watch a movie or read a book about us. And it's something very, very sad. As a child, I think I felt very humiliated by that, by this idea that you have to be European to have this universal ambition. And I think by writing this book, I try also to fight against my own inhibition. When I published The Perfect Nanny, I remember that in France, a very famous critic told me, "You are too gifted to write about Arabs." And she said to me that she thought that it was good and great that my first two book was not about people who were Arabs, and that in a way I was proving that I have talent because I was able to write about white people. And I think, yeah, that's something I'm trying to fight against, because I think it's very, very important to tell Americans or Europeans that you can't even understand yourself if you don't look what is outside, and if you don't understand the way we look at you, and if you don't understand the influence you have on us. And when it comes to Europe, I'm pretty sure that me or a lot of my friends from Morocco, we believe more than European themselves in certain values, in certain European values, and that
Right.
today they probably should come to Africa if they want to remember who they are, because we know about them, we know a lot about them.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I get that. Like it should be more of a reciprocal situation, more
Yeah.
of a reciprocal exchange of interest. And I also think that there's a great damage done to people and to nations when they don't look outward and travel a bit. Nothing brings your home into focus more than leaving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a hell. I mean, it's not easy for everybody to do. You have to have the resources to be able to travel. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but I feel like as a national value, I think there are certain countries which value travel and encourage their citizens and maybe even help their citizens be able to take vacation and go places which the
Mm.
United States does not do a great job of, and to its detriment. And along these lines, if we're talking about cultural exchange, there was something that I read that really interested me about you in writing this book and searching for inspiration. And it has to do with American Western movies, like American Westerns, and also Southern literature in particular, William Faulkner, Carson McCullers, and Flannery O'Connor. Why were these influences helpful to you?
First, I think that it was interesting to begin this book about Morocco and France and try to go find references in another country, in another language. It would have been maybe too easy. I told you that I have something with difficulty. Too easy to go find all my references in the colonial literature and to do the same as other authors did. But also I felt that the atmosphere of those books, of those authors, when it comes to tension between gender, tension between race, the description of nature in the south of the United States, you feel that nature is at the same time beautiful, fascinating, and dangerous. And that's something I really wanted to convey in my own book, this idea that yeah, nature is resisting and is resisting all the characters. So yeah, it was very inspiring for me. I think that they are probably one of the authors I love the most. So they were like, yeah, looking after me while I was writing this book.
I should say too that the translation by Sam Taylor is excellent. Whenever I talk to an author whose work is in translation, I always like to give a shout out to the translator, particularly when it is done so well as it is here. And I know that you worked with Sam on the previous book, maybe
Yeah.
multiple previous books, but I know In the Country of Others was also translated by him, correct?
All my books. He translated all my books, and we have a very, yeah, very beautiful and strong relationship right now. You know, he translated maybe 6 or 7 of my books, so he knows me very well. He knows a lot of things about me, my obsessions, and also probably my flaws as a writer. And I love to have discussion with him and dialogue with him, because it's also interesting that you know, you discover a lot about a language and about a country by having this kind of dialogue with your translator. You know, I remember we had like a debate about the use of a word that is impossible to use in the United States, but that we can use in France or even in England. And it was interesting because he explained to me why, and I got conscious of a whole history here in the United States. And no, it was very interesting. So I love to have this kind of discussion with my translators in general.
I imagine you probably haven't heard anything. I like it's kind of a shame because the translator does this really unsung work, right? They do this great work that doesn't often get recognized. And yet if they do their job well, people won't talk about it. It's
Yeah.
when they do their job poorly that people are like, yeah, these words were wrong or this felt flat, like something's not right here because this was a huge bestseller in France or Morocco and it's not really resonating here the same way and all this kind of stuff. So kudos to Sam, and it reads beautifully as a native
I
English
will
speaker.
tell him. I will tell him,
Yeah.
and we'll be very happy.
So I want to talk to you about, like you mentioned earlier, your background in political science and this education at this university, this school. I'm going to forget the name of it. Can you say it again? On the Boulevard Saint
Sciences
Germain?
Po, like science, politique, Sciences Po.
Oh, Sciences Politique. Okay, so you have now done and maybe are continuing to do some work. I believe it is unpaid work, which needs to be noted, but it's governmental related. You are working for the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's a global body that promotes the French language abroad, essentially, and helps to sort of advance the cause of the French language, which I think, again, maybe distinguishes France in my understanding of it. There's a lot of pride in the French language and a very concerted effort to ensure that it exists. And I find it interesting, when new technology, for example, comes about and it might be, say, invented in the United States. I study French with Duolingo every day, I should say. I'm very mediocre. But there's always a word in French for, say, computer. Like computer is ordinateur.
Yeah.
Cell phone is not a mobile or a cell phone. It is a portable. Like France does not just adopt usually words from other cultures, though like weekend, super, like there are some, but usually France makes a point to sort of make its own language, which I appreciate. So, I guess you're working with President Macron, or at least you're one of his, I don't even know how do you characterize it, but can you talk a little bit about this role?
Yes, of course. So President Macron, he asked me when he was elected the first time, he asked me to become sort of an ambassador for French language. The idea was also to decolonize the vision that we have of francophonie, because for a lot of people, francophonie is associated to colonization and to this idea that if other people than French people speak French, it's because they were colonized, and so that they are in a way victim of this language. But we really want to fight against this idea, and the thing is to say that the French language doesn't belong to French people and is not French anymore. Actually, French language is also Moroccan, it's Senegalese, it's Haitian, it's from Switzerland, from Belgium, from many, many countries. And the idea is to tell people you don't have to justify yourself for speaking French. This is your language, and you speak it like you want to speak it. You have the right to have an accent and to make mistake. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think for a long time, people had a very arrogant and quite snobbish vision of French. Like French language is supposed to be spoken perfectly in a very literary version of French, and I really fight against that. I think that what is important is to speak a language and to love it. And we fight also a lot for multilingualism, and especially in Africa. You know, in Africa, in every African countries, people speak at least 2 or 3 languages. In a country like Morocco, people speak Arabic, Berber, Spanish, French, now a little bit English. And I think it's a big chance for the next generation, and it's really, really something that we should continue to fight for, especially, and that's why I accepted this job. You know, in the context of the rise of Islamism and conservatism, people like this, the Islamists, they say that we are supposed to speak just one language. We should only speak Arab because that's the language of the Quran, and we should only read one book, which is the Quran. And I really fight against that. I believe the more language you speak and the more human you are. And I love learning a new language. Now I live in Portugal. I speak Portuguese, I speak Spanish, I speak French, I speak English, and I love that. I love translating from one language to another. I think it makes you, more human.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yet another one of my gentle criticisms of the United States is how monolingual we are. I'm trying, drives me crazy. My kids, God willing, will speak multiple languages. And
Ah, that's good.
yes, I don't know why we insist on only being in English. It's a big problem. But I want to talk to you about, you're a very busy human being. You're writing all these books. You're the chair of the jury for the 2023 International Booker Prize. You're working as this ambassador for President Macron, and you're churning out novels. When do you, and you're a mother, you've got a family life that's obviously keeping you very busy. How do you get all this done?
It's hard. I'm a workaholic. I work all the time, and now I'm in a point in my life where I'm asking myself, why? Why am I doing that? I think that maybe I had a sort of complex of or a fear of being a fraud when I had this success, and I felt that I needed to prove something to people, to myself, and so I worked and I worked and I worked. And when you do that, the system wants more and more and more from you. They always ask you for a new interview and a new presentation and a new traveling and this and that. So yeah, now I'm thinking that maybe I should learn to say no and to take some holidays, because it has been a very, very, very long time since I've been on holidays.
I can imagine. Well, I'm glad you said yes to talk to me. I know you could have easily said no. Next time around, you can shut me down. Just be like, absolutely not. I'm going to be on holiday. And I know that you have to go because you have
Yeah.
yet another event to go to. So I'm going to let you go. But before I do, I always ask my guests what they are working on or what is coming next. And I believe it is the third book in this trilogy, correct?
Yes, absolutely. The third book.
And this is the one that, like the Leila character is the center of this one, right? So now you're
Yeah,
turning
a
the lens
character
on
that
yourself.
looks a little bit like me, and at the same time fictionalized. We'll see. We'll see if she's me or not. I don't know yet.
All right, and she's going to be complex, right? You're not gonna make her a hero, right?
Obviously.
Yeah, if you're gonna do this to others, you got to do it to yourself too. So, do we have a publication date? Is that book done, or are you in the
No,
works on
no,
it?
no, no.
Okay. Well, Leila, I know you have to go, so I'm going to let you go. It has been a delight to meet you. Enchanté. Thank
Merci.
you. Yeah, thank you for the time. Congratulations on Watch Us Dance. and its publication here in North America. And best of luck on the next book. Does the next book have a title yet?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, we'll wait and see then. Enjoy your time in the States. Safe travels, and my thanks once again.
Thank you.